Hi there everybody. So today we're going to move a little bit away from blended whiskey and we're going to talk about single malt. Now there is a couple of key differences between single malt whiskey and blended whiskey, so we're going to cover that a little bit today. But if you really want to know more about blended whiskey, please feel free to watch my video from last week where we cover what makes blended whiskey and how it comes to be such perfection. So to be a single malt, you have to be made a single distillery, you have to exclusively use malted barley, and you also have to be aged in Scotland for 3 years in oak casks. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the processes to how we get to this lovely bottle that we have here. So in those processes we're going to go through it step by step. Now I'm not going to go into too much detail about it, so if you do have any further questions or want any more deeper insight, please feel free to drop me a message as I can talk about this for hours. Now the first stage we're going to look at here is malting. Now malting is the process by which we soak the grains, in this case barley, allow them to start to germinate so we can start to produce these sugars. We then stop the germination by kilning and heating and drying essentially these grains, and therefore instead of using it to spout that we would see in germination, we've got all these lovely stored sugars. After that we have our barley and we mill it. What that essentially does is pulverise it down into a grist which we then use to make our mash. So they then take it into a mash tun, and what the mash tun essentially allows is to take this lovely sugary barley and turn it into a sugary liquid. Now this liquid is known as wort. What we essentially do is we take all these lovely bits of grist that we've produced and we add hot water. Now the hot water just helps to take all those sugars out and make this sugary syrup. Now over in these bad boys we have our fermentation tank. Now fermentation is where we start to produce a lot of the flavour and where we start to produce the alcohol. This is a similar process to when we create things like wine and beer. By adding wort in, along with yeast, what we do is allow the liquid to ferment. Now what that essentially means is that it sucks in all of the sugar and it exhales carbon dioxide and alcohol. So we start to produce this beer-like substance that we would get. Now this goes up to around about 8% alcohol, and as you can imagine we've still got a fair way to go before we get up to the fortes, or obviously much higher with whiskey. What we then do is we take it into one of the most important areas, and that is our stills. Now here are two beautiful stills, and this is where we essentially concentrate that flavour down. What we are doing is by heating this beer-like liquid, we are removing the alcohol from the water. By heating to a temperature higher than the boiling point of alcohol but lower than the boiling point of water, all of our water will stay sat in the container, in this place is still, while the alcohol evaporates off. What we then have is the low wines. Now the low wines aren't quite whiskey, they're only between 25 and 30%. So what we then need to put it through is a second set of stills. We take these low wines and we put them into our spirit stills. Now the spirit stills allow us to increase alcohol again, and along with getting rid of any of those unnecessary substances that we don't necessarily want. Now we break this off into three parts: head, heart and tail. Now the head and the tail get cut off and we don't use them in our spirit. What we do is we put them back into the distillation to distill them again. So we don't really waste any of this product. Once we've got that heart, we are then ready for aging. Now before we age, the one final thing we do is we dilute our spirit. This is so that we can get the right sort of ABV that we want for our aging process to begin. Now we put this spirit into our oak casks for at least 3 years and a day. Now this is the absolute legal minimum, and up until this point we cannot call it whiskey. So some people will say, oh, can you get the unaged spirit? You can't normally buy it, but if you can, you're not allowed to call it whiskey. Then the maturation process really begins. We allow the spirit to sit within these casks, and it takes lots of different flavours from the cask itself and an interaction between the two. The one unfortunate circumstance of this, however, is the angel share. Now the angel share is the loss of spirit and in fact the loss of alcohol content due to evaporation. The reason we call it the angel share is because it's the idea that the angels are drinking our whiskey. If you happen to have a bottle of your Aberfeldy 12 or even the older age statements, you will see a little barrel here. Now this barrel indicates the different angel share. So as we get older and older, what we will see is the angel share becoming higher and the volume of liquid that we have lower. At this stage we have our cask and our whiskey. We allow this to mature, and you don't have to mature on site, it can be matured anywhere in Scotland, but it has to be matured in Scotland. Now after that, after say 12 years with the Aberfeldy 12, what we have is our whiskey. Now, with most single malts, what we don't do is take the whiskey straight out of the barrel and bottle it. And the reason for this is we look for consistent distillery flavours. We want to be able to produce this average value 12 year after year, bottle after bottle. And not every cask is going to interact exactly the same way. So although we are then taking different casks, we are blending them together. Now this is still single malt whiskey because it's all about the single distillery. However, if you were to take it from a single cask and bottle it, that would be a single cask bottling. We would also normally reduce the ABV to a drinking strength that suits the distillery character best. Now those will change depending on the distillery, and some independent bottlers especially will distill at what we call cask strength, which means there's no added dilution after maturation. Once we do all of that, the only thing that can then be added to the whiskey is what we call caramel colouring. Now caramel colouring can be added to all types of whiskey, and it doesn't necessarily impart flavour, or obviously the caramel that you might expect. What it does is change the colour. Now the main reason for this is to produce consistency. As you can imagine, you can be drinking bottles for year on year on year, and you don't want to go in a supermarket and see two bottles completely different colours, even though they might possess exactly the same flavours. This caramel colouring just allows them to create consistency year after year, bottle after bottle. And the last process I want to talk about is chill filtration. Now chill filtration is a process where we chill down the whiskey and then we send it through a filter. Now what this filter can then catch at this colder temperature is fatty acids, proteins and esters that are produced during the distillation process. This means that we can then bottle below 46%. Once we've done all those processes, once we've done our malting, milling, mashing, fermentation, distillation and maturation, we then have our lovely whiskey. Now I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to take this time to pour myself a dram and enjoy it with this wonderful weather we're having here. Hope you guys have enjoyed, and if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me privately. Thank you very much.